As 2018's coming to a close, I thought we would take a look back at some of the liberal lunacy that the social justice warriors have subjected us to this year. Coming in at number 10 are the thousands of twits on Twitter who decided to attack that girl in Utah for wearing a Chinese prom dress, saying that she had committed cultural appropriation. My culture is not your damn prom dress! If you can't wear a garment of clothing from someone else's culture, then I'm sorry, black people and Asians, but no more blue jeans. That means you, Jackie Chan. Coming in at number 9 are those SJWs who were concerned about white children wearing the Black Panther costume for Halloween. They were so concerned, in fact, that it made headlines across the country. Can my white child dress as Black Panther for Halloween? People magazine declared, quote, parents of white children may want to think twice before purchasing the Black Panther costume this year. No, but you may want to think twice before posting such nonsense. Coming in at number 8 is the Weather Channel's Matt Siddell, who posted this picture of the season's first snowman he spotted in New Hampshire on his Twitter account, but captioned it with the politically correct term, snow person. Unfortunately, he's not just some lone lunatic out there, because there are plenty of other people out there who think that snowmen should be called snow people to promote gender equality. I'm certainly no weatherman, but I did accurately forecast the war on snowmen before it started. In my new book, Liberalism Find a Cure, on page 138, you can go and see for yourself. Number 7 goes to the Washington Post for publishing this article asking if your spin class is too young, too thin, and too white. It goes on to complain that there's just too many white people working out at the gym and taking yoga class. Even crazier than that's the woman who comes in at number 6 on the list for suing Walmart for discrimination because they lock up the black beauty products in her location because so many people keep stealing them. Here she is at a press conference with her lawyer, who is, of course, Gloria Allred.
When I walked down the aisle and saw that Walmart had placed all of the African American hair and skin products under lock and key, I had to pause.
Grundy shot this video describing what she found at a Walmart in Paris.
When it comes to African American products, they put it all in one category and they locked it up. I felt that I was being treated as a person who might be a thief, even though I have no criminal history.
While you may not be a thief, common sense reveals that stores always lock up the products which are most frequently stolen. In fact, I think I'm going to call my lawyer and sue Walmart for gender discrimination because they lock up the men's razors too. Coming in at number 5 is the Huffington Post for complaining that Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer perpetuates gender norms and involves bullying. Coming in at number 4 is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez for threatening to subpoena Donald Trump Jr. in response to him mocking her with his meme on his Instagram account, which shows her asking, "Why are you so afraid of a socialist economy?" And then has President Trump answering, "Because Americans want to walk their dogs, not eat them." If you happen to be as dumb as Miss Cortez, I'll quickly explain the joke to you. It's because socialist countries like Venezuela are so poor from their mismanagement, their people are starving and out of desperation are resorting to literally eating their dogs. She responded to Donald Trump Jr. saying, "I noticed that Jr. here has a habit of posting nonsense about me whenever the Mueller investigation heats up. Please keep it up, Jr. It's definitely a very, very large brain idea to troll a member of a body that will have subpoena power in a month. Have fun." While this is a perfect example of a threat that a corrupt political party would make to their opponents, we're not really too concerned about you, Miss Cortez, because you couldn't even pass a 5th grade civics exam. Coming in at number 3 is Starbucks for giving this guy, who goes by the name of Hotep Jesus, a free cup of reparations coffee after they were under fire for kicking out a couple of black men who were loitering and were accused of being racist.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
All right, I heard y'all was racist, so I came to get my free coffee.
I saw that.
Yeah, I heard you guys don't like black people, so I wanted to get my Starbucks reparations voucher. What's that?
Is that a real thing?
It's a real thing.
I mean, I'll give it to you. I saw that on my Twitter last night. I was like,
Yeah, I need a free
I'll
coffee.
give you a free coffee.
That's what I'm talking about.
Oh, he got his free coffee all right, because she didn't want to be accused of the dreaded R word either. Coming in at number 2 is the Miss America pageant for eliminating the swimsuit competition. The only reason anybody even watches the show. Of course, their ratings dropped 20%, and half those watching probably hadn't heard that the swimsuit competition had been eliminated, and I'm sure that they will never watch ever again. I mean, what's next? Adding a hijab onto Barbie? Oh wait, what's this? Meet Hijarbi, the hijab-wearing Barbie becoming a star on Instagram? Coming in at number 1 for the craziest social justice warrior of the year is MSNBC's Joe Scarborough, for writing and recording this song, which he says is an anthem to the anti-Trump resistance. And they put together this music video for MSNBC and actually aired it.
Once in your life, you may get the chance to stand against a column of tanks.
This is not a joke, by the way. This is really his song, and it's really the music video for it.
Once in your life, you may dare hold out your hand.
Resist the racism
to a stranger in need.
That's all I can say. Hope you guys had a great year, and thanks for all your support. All you guys who kept me going this year. Everyone who sponsors the channel through Patreon, tips me through PayPal. All you guys who read my shirts and wear my books. All you guys who read the books and wear the shirts, thanks for all your support this whole year. I don't know if I'll have a video for you guys tomorrow on New Year's Day, so if not, just check back on Wednesday and I'll try to get back to the regular schedule. Have a great night, and I will see you next year.
When it comes to political correctness, it just gets worse and worse, doesn't it? From make-believe cultural appropriation to supposedly insensitive language, the amount of fake outrage manufactured by Generation Snowflake is never-ending. In fact, how I mourn for the satirists employed by the likes of Mad Magazine and The Onion, because the stuff that triggers the SJW set these days, well, it's beyond parody, isn't it? I mean, hey, who needs the Comedy Network when the nightly newscast is chock full of so many unintentionally funny stories thanks to the trolls who are employed by the grief industry? So, what new acts of PC insanity can we expect in 2019? Well, recently I culturally appropriated a crystal ball from an elderly Roma woman, and I gazed into that mystical sphere to come up with a six-pack of predictions for those things that were tolerated or unnoticed this year, but will likely be deemed politically incorrect in the months ahead. For example, number 1, the terms Great White Shark and Great White North will be relegated to the scrap heap of inappropriate language, given that when the words great and white are used as part of the same descriptor, that might be deemed by some as Caucasian exceptionalism, and we can't have that. Number 2, the terms scalping and scalper in regard to those who sell tickets to sold-out sports matches and music concerts will no longer be tolerated due to potential offense experienced by those who make up the First Nations, Aboriginal, Indigenous, Native community. Moving forward, the politically correct term for scalper will now be ticket reseller professional. Number 3, brainstorming as a descriptor for a group meeting in which ideas are tossed about for discussion will also come under the ban in 2019, given that brainstorming might be deemed as being insensitive to those suffering from mental illness. Number 4, the term trans fats as a shorthand descriptor for unsaturated fatty acids will be renamed by the food science community in an effort to avoid creating potential offense to those who make up the obese transsexual community. Number 5, the entomologist community issues an edict demanding that white Anglo-Saxon Protestants stop being referred to as wasps so that members of the bee community are not offended. Number 6, and finally, a province-wide contest will be launched in British Columbia to come up with a new name for the British part of British Columbia, given that British is too, well, you know, British sounding, and that British conjures up reminders of Canada's ghastly, Eurocentric, colonialist past. After a lack of consensus, it is decided that the province shall simply be known as Columbia. Alas, even though the provincial Columbia is spelt differently than the South American nation of Colombia, confusion continues to reign as Canada's westernmost province sees a huge uptick of low-flying Cessnas landing in the hinterland, expecting to whisk away copious quantities of crack cocaine, but having to settle instead on cargo that consists of homegrown wacky tobacco. On the plus side, the provincial economy experiences an unexpected uptick thanks to the influx of wannabe Pablo Escobars. Arriba! For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, the Rebel has a new app. Please download that app and take the Rebel with you wherever you go.
The New Year's is a time to reminisce, get excited about the future, and celebrate. But if you curled up to watch the New Year's coverage with your children, you may need to start the New Year's off with a talk about responsible drinking, feminine hygiene, and how not to wish the death of a party with millions of subscribers. Well, to kick the New Year's off right, let's start off with a list of the top leftist fails at the New Year's celebration. I'm Ben Davies. This is Pure Hollywood. It's been said that you don't really know someone until you have a few drinks with them. Well, the moral arbiters of the mainstream media and their guests showed us exactly who they were and confirmed all of our suspicions at the New Year's celebration. Let's kick things off with ya boy Anderson Cooper, who threw back shots of tequila while millions watched on. Now, I'd be tempted to give Anderson a pass if he didn't take down the shot like a 12-year-old girl choking on a box of movie theater Sour Patch. But what's even better is a few moments separated CNN contributor Randy Kay bonged champagne while millions watched. Now, it's not the fact that Randy completely shows up Anderson live on TV, or the fact that CNN and its host look like a college frat house bringing in the new year. It's the fact that these are the same people who decried Brett Kavanaugh, an alcoholic, unhinged monster, for liking beer. Yeah, wait, do you remember that? I remember that. Pepperidge Farm remembers that. But not to be outdone, Anderson goes on to talk about his mother's sex life live on TV. I mean, who doesn't want to hear about that, right? Right? Can the ball please drop now? But just when you think you couldn't be more ready for 2018 to end live on TV, Chrissy Teigen goes out to throw more lighter fluid on the dumpster fire by going on a tangent about steaming her vagina. Now gather round, kids, let's talk about appropriate conversations on TV. And bonus fail, just to, you know, get ready for the new year, actress and comedian Tiffany Haddish vowed to wear fur every day until, quote, police stop killing black people. Wait, how does that work? Are there no crimes ever? Anyway, well, maybe she didn't think that through, but she definitely didn't think through her comedy set on New Year's. That she bombed so hard her fans actually walked out after paying and she had to publicly apologize afterwards. What a great year, Rebels. And I want to give a shout out to the left for giving me so much material in 2018. I can't wait for the new year. I'm Ben Davies. This is Pure Hollywood. Did you enjoy that video? Of course you enjoyed that video. So now you need to become a premium member to the Rebel. That way, you have first access to Pure Hollywood and the entire Rebel lineup. It's time for everyone's favorite topic, purity rings, and how a little dash of third-wave postmodern feminism can literally destroy everything. We see the hostility, resentment, and the unraveling of the social fabric, and now one of the pillars of our culture is on the brink of slipping, the church. And a prime example of this is a former evangelical feminist pastor who plans on collecting purity rings, which are of course a symbol of patriarchal oppression, and recasting them to be a giant gold vagina to celebrate impurity. This will be great, right? I'm Ben Davies. This is Pure Hollywood. First, let's talk about the patriarchal oppression for a second. Me and many of my friends growing up had purity rings because we wanted to be those knights in shining armor to promote chivalry and save ourselves for the one we'd love forever. So I wonder if this pastor will melt down some male feminist purity rings and recast them into a giant gold penis. I wonder if I can get them all collected and see if she'll do it. But of course, feminists and postmodernists alike believe that gravity is a result of literally the universe circling around them. So let's just follow their train of thought through. Of course, like many, the Huffington Post believe purity rings are a problem. They ask the question, quote, what should Christian feminists do with their old purity rings? Symbols of a patriarchal theology that has harmed countless women? Well, the obvious solution was found by former evangelical pastor and Christian author Nadia Bowles-Weber. And it's for you to send in your old purity rings so that she can recast them into a giant gold vagina to celebrate impurity. Woo! And you'll even get a certificate to show you did it. So let's talk about the culture for a second, and not from a religious standpoint. Is celebrating impurity for you better than abstinence? You know, sexual liberation. It's empowering. Tell me this, what physician would tell you? Oh, you want a more healthy reproductive system and less chance of contracting an STD? Try more sex. Yeah, use a condom and pills because those always work. Now, get out there and get after it. Or your therapist telling you, hey bro, do you want to feel more competent and respected as a man? Well, you need to go work on your game so you learn how to manipulate and disarm as many women as possible. And sleep with as many women as possible so you don't just feel like a giant dirtbag. And don't worry, when you get married, you're going to say those magic words. And those old habits will never come back to ruin your family or marriage. Or your psychiatrist telling you, oh, you're struggling with relationships and self-worth? And that creeping feeling of being nothing more than a toy passed around by the varsity team? Just go have more sex, it'll play itself out. I think we can all agree that none of these are good for culture or society as a whole. And here's why purity is under attack. Society thrives on healthy relationships between the sexes, building a strong family and raising up the next generation, and living a life fulfilled with the people that you love. And one of the many tasks that aid and help achieving this goal is purity. It's at least something to shoot for so you limit the problems you encounter, and it has always been encouraged by the church and as a result, the culture. It was for men to be respectful and chivalrous against the dirtbags who seek to abuse and manipulate, and for women to be virtuous, so as not to have their hearts tainted and abused. Now, the culture already promotes completely otherwise, and when even the church fails, this is bad. Look, I'm not knocking anyone who has had sex before marriage. It is something incredibly rare and difficult today, even though I know many men and women both who have done this. And I get it, some churches do the whole shaming bit, which is absolutely ridiculous. Jesus never shamed anyone. He called you to have your body be a temple, to realize you're a child of God with value that is priceless, that is worth more than a cheap thrill. I mean, he literally stood between religious leaders who were trying to kill prostitutes. But even though virginity till marriage is more rare today, it does not mean it's not an exemplary goal to have. Purity is not something to be scoffed at for either one of the sexes. And I want to give you a little tip to know if your church is slipping. Volz Weber said, which I can only assume she's talking about her vagina, said, quote, this part of me is mine and I get to determine what is good for it, and if it's beautiful, and how I use it in the world, unquote. When your pastor starts saying I or mine instead of his or yours, check to see if your pastor's playing God and wanting you to follow and serve their own self-centered ideology. As Christians, we're servants of Christ, and everything is his. And for people who are not religious, who just want to live in a cohesive environment, I think demonizing purity while promoting promiscuity is probably not good for anyone. I'm Ben Davies, this is Pure Hollywood. Did you enjoy that video? Of course you enjoyed that video. So now you need to become a premium member to the Rebel. That way you have first access to Pure Hollywood and the entire Rebel lineup. Well, just when I think the mainstream can't possibly go further off the moral cliff, they go and do something like have a hit TV show, do an episode on, quote, Virtuous pedophiles. I'm Ben Davies. This is Pure Hollywood. The hit TV show The Good Doctor is in its second season, and maybe they thought, well, we should spice things up. Or they know the depraved ideology and culture they're trying to promote accepts all forms of sexual expression. So they decided to focus on the next cause. The title of this episode is called, quote, Empathy, but don't worry. They sought to make a strong distinction between someone who is suffering from a psychiatric disorder of, pedophilia and those who molest children. Because, it's fine to have someone around who actively wants to rape you. As long as they're nice and don't actually do it. What are you, some bigot? Or, having someone who openly wants to kill you but doesn't act on it. You'd be kind of a bigot if you didn't want that person living next to you, right? Look, I have sympathy for people who have issues, which sympathy by definition is acknowledging someone's hardships. Like you suffered abuse in childhood and now you have urges to harm people. And I'm sorry you have to deal with that, but you better acknowledge it and fight tooth and nail to resist it and correct it. Because what you got is wrong. Period. It will never be normalized or accepted. But encouraging the audience to empathize with pedophilia is nothing short of insane. The definition of empathize being, quote, understanding what others are feeling because you have experienced it yourself or can put yourself in their shoes, unquote. Put yourself in a pedophile's shoes to understand it, to fight discrimination and bigotry? What? Look, I'm sorry you have an illness, but the answer is no. And for these studios and producers to try to destigmatize something that is so monstrous is beyond reprehensible. Please, at some point, we all have to be be like, no. No to these radicals who agree to write, produce, act, and spend millions to make absolute trash like this. I'm Ben Davies. This is Pure Hollywood. Did you enjoy that video? Of course you enjoyed that video. So now you need to become a premium member to the Rebel. That way you have first access to Pure Hollywood and the entire Rebel lineup.
Well, House Majority Whip, Steve Scalise. Now, he's the one that got shot during that baseball game.
Yes.
And did a great recovery, thank the Lord. Anyway, here's a response on how far apart the two sides are.
I don't think it's as much that the two sides are far apart. It's that you've got one side that refuses to negotiate because they're so afraid of the radical left base that wants open borders. And look, a lot of them campaigned on abolishing ICE. And just think about this, Sandra. Last year alone, ICE agents, these border agents that are protecting the interior of our country, saved more than 900 children from sexual assault and human trafficking. That stuff is actually happening at the border. We're stopping a lot of it, but we're surely not stopping all of it. And so you just see this cop killer in California. He was here illegally. There are bad people that are trying to cross this border. There are good people that come here legally every day, like Officer Singh, who came here from Fiji legally to seek the American dream. But there are also really bad people that came over, like the cop killer. How many of them are getting through that we don't stop every day?
Yeah, that's the deal. So the argument, I think what the American people are seeing the politics of this, and they're sick of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Because there's nothing that benefits the American people with a shutdown and a weak border.
Yeah, yeah.
And now we have them both.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so I think, like I said, I went through a lot of articles and websites looking for any kind of a legitimate article that would support the Democratic side.
Yeah.
Can't find one.
Wow.
Other than it's a complaint against the president. But I couldn't find a legitimate argument that supports the reason not to have a wall.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I have heard reports from some prominent Republicans who have come out of negotiations with prominent Democrats about this issue, and they're disgusted because basically the inside story is that they don't want to give Trump a victory.
Right.
That's why they're blocking this. Nothing else.
That's it. It's a victory on a major campaign promise.
Right.
So this is politics, and I think America is sick of it. Just absolutely sick of it. So we'll see where this goes. Well, Mickey Addison, she's a public liaison person for American Family Association, which is one of the great organizations out there. She's been tracking and telling us for over a year and a half that Netflix has put out a television series called 13 Reasons Why. And now teenagers are binge watching this and committing suicide. It basically glorifies suicide. And here's what it says, that if you're being bullied, that the best way you can get back to your bulliers
is to kill yourself.
Is to kill yourself.
Oh, my gosh.
Thinking that that's temporary and you're going to come back. Okay? A lot of teenagers today don't see death as permanent because all the games and movies they see, it's not permanent.
Yeah.
And so anyway, Netflix in all of their wisdom decided to create episode, or at least season 2. Anyway, here's her take on it.
It paints a picture that someone has taken advantage of you. Maybe you've been bullied, you've had your feelings hurt, and you're going to get the ultimate revenge. And the ultimate revenge on that person is to have them live with a lifetime of guilt over the fact that you committed suicide because of what they did. Now, the problem with this thought, the problem with this idea is that we are talking about kids whose brains are not fully formed. We are talking about kids whose capacity to reason is not fully developed. So when you watch a program and you think that the emotion that gets conjured up in that program, that, oh, these people feel guilty, they wish they hadn't done it, you almost think that you're going to be able to witness that. And I hate to say this because it sounds almost condescending of our kids, and I don't mean it to sound that way at all, but our young people don't realize the finality of death. They have not been able to conceptualize that this is not a movie. You don't get to come back in the flashbacks. You don't get to come back in the follow-up. You know, that when you take your life, you have taken your life permanently. That's it. You don't come back. And so what we are trying to say, what we are strongly saying and pleading with Netflix is that our kids' lives are valuable. And until they are at an age where they can really process the finality of death, we should not encourage that there is a type of revenge that you can get by taking your own life.
Wow.
There it is. Wow. And so I would say that you can go to the AFA.net website and you can sign a petition there that gets sent over to Netflix about this.
Yeah.
And then there's another movie that they put out. I won't mention that one, but it basically is, it's so bad about minor sexuality that I can't even describe it on the air.
Right.
And yet these are things that you talk, that you can get there. So Netflix needs to hear from you, loud and clear. And I realize it's a convenient thing and you have your choice to watch good and bad. And that's how a lot of people justify it. It's what you click on. But on the other hand, they're producing this kind of material, and it's really, it's just killing our kids.
So, I mean, I've just wrapped up a book on education called The Case Against Education, where I argue for defunding education. Right, so yes, so like, isn't that bad for you? Well, yeah, it would be bad for me if people listen, but still my conscience says this is the right thing to do.
Okay, so sell me on that. I went to a public elementary school, public junior high, public high school. I went to State University of New York at Binghamton, which was hugely subsidized by the government. I think it was around $9,000 a year, and I got a great education. Why am I wrong on that?
So I went to public schools right in this neighborhood, actually, but. So like the heart of my case is something called the signaling model of education. So this is a fancy term for a common sense idea. It just says that a lot of the reason why education pays is not that it's teaching useful job skills, but rather you're jumping through hoops to show off for employers. All right, so just think about all the classes that you ever had to take, and then how few of them are actually relevant to the job that you do. You actually probably have a job where you do use more of what you studied. Although,
I was a political science major,
yes.
So there you go.
But think about all the classes that were required where you would not have been allowed to graduate without going through all of them. So I always have this example. Imagine you're like one Aristotle class short of college graduation, and yet you want to finish that class. Why? Because you're going to use the Nicomachean ethics and on the job. Probably not. Rather because you want that diploma, and employers are like many employers will just throw your application right in the trash unless you have that diploma.
But do you lose something doing it your way because of just a certain breadth of knowledge? Now, I'm not saying that every class should be mandated, and of course they stick you in things that shouldn't be necessary. But just that in terms of college specifically, that's where you should get a broad sense of knowledge. Would that be at risk then?
Well, here's the thing. It's not at risk because almost no one gets it now. So that is the harsh truth, is that if you just go and look at what graduates of the current system know, it is next to nothing. Right? So there have been some great nationally representative surveys of what American adults know about government, about history, about economics, and the answer is they know next to nothing. So if we were to defend the system saying that people need breadth of knowledge, well, it's not a defense of the current system because the current system has not given it to them. The way that I like to think about it is that typical American college graduate is lucky to maybe answer half of the most basic questions you can imagine on civics.
Yeah.
Now you might say, well, that was still worthwhile. I say, it's not worthwhile because what do you call someone who knows half their letters? What do you call someone who knows half their letters?
An idiot?
Illiterate. If you know half your letters, you are illiterate. You're not half literate if you know half your letters. You are illiterate because you cannot read. Similarly, say if you know half the basic facts about U.S. history or about American government, you don't know half of what you need to know. You just don't know it at all.
If you think there are
you don't have a clue.
If you think there are 1.5 branches of government, we're in a lot of trouble.
You just don't have a clue about what's going on. And that's what the current system has given us. So when people say, like, wouldn't this be a disaster? Say, well, you might say the current system is a disaster, but what I'm proposing wouldn't be worse. Now, there's always the question, well, but why not go and redouble our efforts so that people really do learn the stuff? That people generally forget what they learn very quickly. So on test day, actually, I believe that most of the students in the civics class probably actually kind of knew their stuff. But what psychologists call fade out is so enormous just like in one year, out the next. If you don't keep testing it, you don't keep using it, you lose it. I mean, this is some of the most interesting research in psychology. So there's a lot of research on fade out in school, where you go and you teach the kids something and then you go and measure it 1 or 2 years later in school. But the really scary fade out is from school to adulthood. Because the kids in school, at least they kind of know I'm going to have to learn this again, I might get tested on again. But once you finally graduate, that's it. That's the end.
Yeah.
So there's a fantastic study of retention of higher mathematics throughout life. And like algebra and geometry, like within a couple decades, most people took those classes are back to where they were before they even actually started the classes. The only people who remember their algebra and geometry are people who go all the way up to calculus. So
Right.
you go all the way to
Everyone
calculus,
else.
then you go and retain algebra and geometry for the rest of your life. But you have to go way beyond a subject to actually retain the to retain the basics. And again, and this all fits with like use it or lose it, or Tiger Mom Amy Chu has a great slogan, like every day you don't practice is the day you get worse. So this does go with, well, so why bother teaching people things they're just going to forget anyway?
Yeah.
So I mean this is part of my critique of what's wrong with throwing so much money at at education. So now of course none of this denies that schools do teach some useful material, but again, my view is, all right, again, so like for the useful material, like most people can pay for it, most people's parents can pay for it, and then if there's going to be any role for government, let it be for the small minority of kids whose parents are not able to take care of them, or charity's not taking care of them, and then for just that last sliver of people. If there's going to be a role for government, let it be that. So don't throw money at a problem. There's going to be money, let it be narrowly targeted to give, to be mindful that you are taking money from taxpayers without their consent. And at minimum, you owe them a responsibility to spend the money well. I think that seems like a really basic thing.
I think we've given up that minimum a long time ago.
Yeah, but again, so it's one thing to say, look, this is so important that that you have to pay whether you like it or not. Too bad. But then go and spend that money heedlessly. That seems like a true human rights abuse to take someone for money at gunpoint and then just blow it.
If someone called you a robot, would you be offended? Probably, right? After all, robots can't actually think for themselves. They just mimic humans by cranking out pre-programmed responses. But what if I told you that more than likely, you and most of the people you know are a certain type of robot? No, not that kind of robot. I'm talking about an ideological robot. Let's back up. In 2011, a Nobel economist claimed that liberals like him do a better job of understanding their opponent's political views than conservatives do. He said, a liberal can talk coherently about what the conservative view is because people like me actually do listen.
A liberal economist can imitate a conservative economist, can pretend the reverse is not true.
In other words, he was saying that liberals don't just mindlessly reject their opponent's ideas, and they're able to see all sides of an argument, while conservatives unthinkingly misrepresent the views they don't like. Whether or not conservatives or liberals are better at understanding their opponents isn't something we're going to tackle in this video. But it's an interesting question, and it's one that got George Mason professor Brian Kaplan thinking. How could someone show that they truly understand their ideological opponents, and that they're not just repeating pre-programmed arguments? Is there a way someone could prove they aren't just some kind of ideological robot? Enter the ideological Turing test. In 1950, famed computer scientist Alan Turing created a test that assessed whether a computer had achieved human-like intelligence. In 2011, Professor Kaplan wrote about an idea he called the ideological Turing test, a way of testing a person's ability to genuinely understand their opponent's political views. In this test, you talk with someone with opposing views and try to get them to believe that you share their viewpoint. If you're able to fool them, bingo. You've passed the test. The difference here is instead of testing a machine's ability to imitate a human, Professor Kaplan's version tests a human's ability to imitate their opponent's ideas. But so what? Well, consider all the bad ideas in the span of human history. Consider that most of the people at the time thought they were doing the right thing. Now consider all the bad ideas that are still dominant today, and that statistically, you're probably contributing to the survival of some of those bad ideas.
When the old steel trap in here has made up its mind, there's no turning back.
Anyone who wants to help make a better world needs to be able to discern good ideas from bad ones, to imagine the possibility that you could be wrong, and honestly consider other viewpoints. After all, it's pretty easy to think your opponents are stupid, evil, or even crazy when you're making up bad arguments for them. But what if you're forced to make their strongest arguments? It just might put your own beliefs to the test. The philosopher John Stuart Mill once said, "He who knows only his own side of the case knows little of that." And Mill's right. If you don't understand the views you disagree with, then you've likely never put your own views to the test. And when you ignore or misrepresent opposing views, chances are you're not looking for the truth. The human mind is biased, and yours is no exception. But there are real ways you can defy that bias. So whenever you're about to write off your opponent's views, give yourself a mini ideological Turing test. See if you can describe their beliefs in a way that you can honestly tell yourself they'd accept. Chances are, their arguments will look a little more reasonable, even if you still don't agree with them. But more importantly, it'll prevent you from making bad, one-sided arguments, and hopefully, bring you closer to the truth.
Hold on to your hats. This next little series is pretty interesting. Our good friend Mickey Addison, she is a spokesperson for the American Family Association, one of the great organizations out there. And I had the chance to talk to her last week. We talked about the responsibility of believers being salt and light. Now, this all stemmed from the question I asked her. I said, Mickey, why is it the American churches are filling up, but we're not changing the culture? She made one statement that, in trying to unpack it, but here was the way. She says, we are afraid to be different. And so in that, we may not be acceptable. Then she goes on talking about being salt and light, and here's what she had to say.
What we are battling is an unprecedented type of fear, because the fear today that Christians have is not a fear that they're going to die. It's not even a fear that their standing for Jesus Christ could cost them their livelihood. Think Aaron and Melissa Klein, or Jack Phillips, or Baronell Stutzman are the owners of Bresh and Nib Studios in Arizona. This is not what we're talking about. We are talking about such a rapid decline among believers that the gripping fear that many Christians are facing when they try to decide how they're going to engage the culture is whether or not they're going to still be liked after they say what the Bible says about sin and about righteousness and about morality. And so we cannot deal with this crossroads that we've come to in our culture until we deal with the deficits that we have in the church. So if I rally someone and call someone to action, but that person say maybe won't share the petition that they signed because they're afraid that if it comes up in their news feed, they'll look like one of those Christians. They'll look like one of those people. Well, then how do we keep moving the ball forward? How do we keep moving ahead? So I think if we want to see us victorious in this hour that we're in, then what we're going to have to really do is make sure that we're communicating the actual gospel to people and not just a social gathering of people who all agree. We've got to have the type of mental fortitude and we've got to have the type of backbone that is willing to walk out into the public square. And look, right now, it's not costing us our lives in the United States of America. Right now, it may cost us likes on Facebook. We've got to be willing to abandon all of that for the cause of Christ. And I think that's really the crossroads of where we are, Perry, when you look at it. Do we have the gospel? Has it gotten to us intact? Are we willing to give our lives for it, figuratively or literally? I mean, this is something that we have to be taught as believers, right? A willingness and a readiness to die for Christ.
Boy, that's so powerful. And I think she's spot on. We're struggling to be different. We are afraid to be different. Scripture says, come out from among them and be ye separate. So what we've done in the American church is that we, even culturally, fashion-wise, music-wise, we have slipped into this area where there's very little distinction. And so the question is, well, the motive is get them in and then let the gospel change them. True, I have no problem with that. I have no problem with that. But it doesn't translate back into the culture. We may be bringing a lot of people in, but are we actually training them into the discipleship to go back out in the culture and change things? I find it so interesting, even in the state of Oregon, that we would lose Measure 106. The only thing you got to look at, it's so simple. And Dave Crow, my good friend Dave Crow, tracks this, and he can tell you about just the evangelical side of Christianity, of those who register to vote, those who are eligible to register to vote, and those who actually vote.
Right.
If you take the Christians in the state of Oregon that are eligible to vote, if they would register and vote, Measure 106 would have passed with incredible victory. And we lost it.
Why?
Because we're afraid to be different. We're afraid to stand out for something that is as biblical as standing on the side of life, because we don't want to offend
Okay, let me ask
anybody.
you this. Is that the same reason why leadership in some churches won't even allow this issue to be discussed openly?
Yeah, because they bought the myth of separation of church and state. And it's really, really sad to watch. It's really sad to watch. We're more about being liked than we are being different. And the world is starving for something different. The world is starving for truth. The world is starving for some kind of a reality that has a substance to it that's really real. And guess what? A relationship with Christ really is real. Why are we trying to package it into something than what it really is? And once you accept Christ, you're now on a road to change. You're on a road to be different. You're on a road to think differently, act differently, talk differently. And yet we kind of water that down so that we don't. We're kind of a chameleon in and out of the culture. We slide around like this. And I think she nails it. I really do. That's my 2 cents, adding to her 15 cents. All right.
I'm Dr. Alveda King, niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. I greet you today, and I just want to share with you a little bit about my family and my history. My uncle, Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., during his lifetime, was a Republican, as was my father, his brother, Reverend A.D. King, and my grandfather, Dr. Martin Luther King, Sr. The Republican Party historically has supported the rights of the oppressed. During the times of slavery, many of the abolitionists were Republicans. Today, we have another issue that is affecting the lives and freedom of many of Americans. Those are the little babies, the preborn. And so as the niece of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., I want to encourage you today to remember the rights of all people, from the womb to the tomb. Dr. King said, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere." Dr. King also said that the Negro cannot win if he's willing to sacrifice the futures of his children for immediate personal comfort and safety. And so today I encourage you, as you make very important decisions on whom you will vote for, to remember to vote for your values and vote for life, liberty, and justice.